Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lou Fucito. I'm a member of the Ridgewood International Film Festival for 2024. And I'm very pleased today to be interviewing one of the directors who has two films in our film festival, and that would be Brian Russell. Brian, good afternoon. Happy to have you.
Hey, Lou, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about two of Brian's movies that are in. The first is Past Prologue, and the second is Not the Same Clarence. But before we get into the movies, I just wanted to talk a little bit about you and your background and so forth. In reading your bio that we have presented in the film festival, I see that a few years ago you sort of made a bit of a midlife change, going from somebody that was kind of behind the camera and really doing videos and that type of stuff to directing. And I was wondering, what have you seen as the challenges and opportunities in making such a switch?
Well, so I don't know if I've entirely made the switch because I still do a lot of, corporate videos, nonprofit fundraising videos to kind of pay the bills. The biggest challenge has been getting people to pay me to write and direct, so that I don't have to do so many of those corporate nonprofit fundraising type videos. That said, making that switch to directing by literally just letting the world know that I'm making films, that I'm writing, that I'm directing, I have actually gotten a number of really nice corporate directing jobs where they hire me to come in and either write scripts or oftentimes script doctor their scripts. They'll often write scripts and they're often around corporate training or presentations to employees, but they want to do it in a more creative way than just somebody sitting there talking, to the audience. So I've done a lot of script doctoring, a lot of writing in the last couple of years, and some directing.
Gotcha.
And my goal is to do more of that.
I can understand you're talking about working in the corporate world, doing a lot of that stuff. That is both rewarding and also great opportunity because it gets your name out there even more. And there's such a need for that, more and more. So that alone helps pay the rent,
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. I mean, listen, I used to love every single interview I ever did, and I still enjoy them, but I would far prefer that somebody backed up the money truck and said, "Here, Brian,
Oh, of
all
course.
these scripts, let's go make them."
Yeah, no, exactly. But at least your name gets out there and it's a good reference information for you.
100%.
So going into the two movies that you've done, I pretty positive that you did Past Prologue first and then into
That's right.
Not the Same Clarence. And I was wondering, is there anything you picked up from the first movie that was good for you to learn from and do in the second movie?
So I've learned a lot in the films that I've directed, and I've been directing films for about 3 years now, starting in 2021. And one of the lessons that I learned on Past Prologue, and this is a lesson I've learned many times, but I seem to keep needing to relearn it, it is to take my time. And the moment that I start to get anxious or nervous or worried about things on set, the right answer is not to move faster. The right answer is to stop everything and take a deep breath. Sometimes that means talking to the talent, talking to my crew. That's always the answer. And I learned that in spades while directing Past Prologue.
Interesting. And I guess there's some of the things that happen with that is you got a budget that you're trying to adhere to too at the same time. And you got filming going, you got actors on call and so forth. So that can be a bit of a challenge, but still necessary. I understand you.
Yeah, listen, with these films, it's not really all about the budget. I mean, you have to do it for something that you can afford to do it, but usually it comes down to time, that we only have a certain amount of time. And that, of course, is reflective of the budget. But also a lot of my cast and crew are pitching in, they're working for free or for reduced rates. And I have to be mindful and respectful of their time. And when you're new to filmmaking, sometimes you make decisions that you realize later on wasn't the best decision for the flow of the day, or wasn't the best decision for harmony on set. Also, in the case of Past Prologue, I was working with James Naughton. It was the first time I had worked with him. And honestly, I was really nervous. And that the first day especially sort of like impacted me. The second day, I felt a lot more comfortable. He showed up ready to work and he was very generous and very giving on set. And I learned a ton. He's a director in his own right. He's directed, Paul Newman on Broadway in Our Town. And he directed The Price by Arthur Miller on Broadway. And he's he has a long career going back 50 years. And my friend Mike Boland, who plays the waiter in the film, the small part, I've worked with him many times. And Mike said to me before we started, he said, "Remember, don't use Jim just for an actor.
Mm,
If he has other experience he's willing to offer, make sure you listen to that."
good opportunity for you. By the way, how did you actually land somebody as big as James Naughton in your little low budget movies at this point?
I had his email from a corporate project a number of years before, and we had had a very brief interaction. He had no idea who I was,
Mhm.
but I emailed him the script. And I always tell the same kind of story, but I emailed him the script, and he emailed me back like within a day. And
Wow.
he said the central action is not well developed, and the characters are not, fully fleshed out. And that was all he said.
Mm,
But he read it.
mm.
So myself and my co-writer Ross Popick rewrote the script a number of times, and we sent it to him again. And it took about 6 months before he finally said yes. And in fact, the yes email from him was, "Brian, my daughter has read the script and is quite moved. She's encouraged me to do it. I'm available in July, but not available in August." And this was like the last week of June
Mm.
of 2022. So I scrambled, found the location, put the project together, and a few weeks later we were on set shooting.
I can
And
understand how you'd move mountains for
yeah,
that.
yeah, it was great. It was great.
Well, thank you. That's interesting, very interesting. So let's move on to the movies. I'm going to start with Past Prologue. I loved it. I loved both of them, quite honestly, and two tearjerkers in many ways. When I watched Past Prologue the second time, it even moved me more. Your movies are so good; they're worth the second and third look for sure.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind.
And in the case of Past Prologue, one of the things I noticed when you do all the flashing back to the couple when they're younger was so much of that. I love the graininess of it, first of all, which is really cool, but also that almost all of it is in silence. You're just showing them enjoying themselves. And I thought it really brought out their humanity and the genuineness and the innocence of it. And I was wondering if that was something you were looking for in doing it that way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the goals was to showcase this couple that had, young love, and they are innocent and naive. I mean, they are aware of the world because they are living in the world that existed at that time.
Mm,
But I think there's a naivete that they can sort of sneak off and have their romance, and it will be unimpacted by the outside world.
mm,
And when we wrote the film, we played with the flashbacks a lot, and we finally came up with this structure of the flashbacks would go in reverse order. So we start with them breaking up, and we
mm,
end with them meeting. And we introduce sound ever so slightly as the flashbacks go on. First, in the form of just kind of background ambiance,
mm,
the sounds of the water and
mm,
the cicadas and that sort of thing. And then when they're doing the milkshake, we hear them talk a little bit, but they
mm,
don't have a conversation until that final scene where they meet for
mm.
the very first time.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. Wow.
And that the goal of the meeting was, how do we have these two people meet in an organic way? We really struggled
Mm,
with that for a long time,
yeah,
because they wouldn't have been going to church together. They wouldn't have been in social circles together. They wouldn't have been in school together.
yeah,
All of these things would have interfered with how they even met in the first place.
gotcha. The other thing, though, the theme that struck me was the theme of risk taking, and how as the two of them look back, and particularly Robert as he looks back, he's lamenting a bit that maybe we should have taken these risks. Well, it doesn't really happen to the end when he has looked back at the couple for another time, but definitely that, and also you bring that even more true in the song at the end, which is a beautifully written music, but the lyrics also kind of bring that together. And 22,000 days certainly resonates quite a bit. And I was thinking, given that I think that theme is in there too, was that a little bit of putting your little risk taking into the different changes that you're making right now in your own career?
Well, I should probably just say yes. Um, but the truth is that in the writing of this story, I wasn't so much thinking about my own risk. People often tell you write what you know.
Mm,
And in the case of Clarence, not the same Clarence, I did write what I knew.
mm,
But none of my other films are writing what I know. They're writing based on things I'm interested in knowing about.
yeah.
And one of the things that we discovered in the writing of Past Prologue was that as Ross and I wrote it together, was that it was a lot easier for Robert to take risks because the consequences for him were relatively small. He wasn't going to be, nobody was going to break into his house. Nobody was going to burn a cross on his front lawn. Nobody was going to beat him up. But she and her family were at great risk. And she mentions that very, very fleetingly. And we didn't want to dwell on that in the film. It's sort of hopefully mostly subtext other than the one time, she says one time explicitly, it was downright dangerous for me and my family. And that's something that even in present day, Robert still hasn't reckoned with. He still wishes that they had followed their hearts. And she says that it was impossible. So I think that the two of them have very different risk assessments and very different understanding of risk based on their place in the world.
No, it's very interesting. Yes, I can understand what you're saying now. And I think, and I'm not going to say her line exactly where she said she had to do what she had to do. When she got married and had children, the way people were expecting them to do, she had to do that. She didn't want to necessarily do it, but she had to do it. And that's why she did it. Great.
Yeah, it's the expectation.
Yeah. The interracial couple or family that you show there, is that your sense of trying to show hope for the future? Or
that's exactly right. That's a real family. Mom, dad, couple of kids.
Yeah.
I will very briefly, I don't know what our time is like here, but I'll very briefly tell you that the idea for this story was born because I was sitting having breakfast in a diner, and next to me was a young family, and maybe the parents were maybe 30 years old. They had a 2-year-old little kid, and the mom's pregnant out to here, but the dad was black and the mom was white. And for some reason, and they were just doing nobody was looking at them. There was nothing special going on. But the thought occurred to me in that moment that there are people alive today that couldn't do what this family was doing right next to me.
Good point.
And the idea of the family at the end of the film was that family that sat next to me in Colorado that day in the diner.
Gotcha. Well, let's move on to your other movie, Not the Same Clarence. And you mentioned your familial association with Alzheimer's, and that your brother-in-law, I guess it was, or father-in-law,
yeah.
Father-in-law, not your brother-in-law. Thank goodness, not your brother-in-law. That'd be even younger. Suffered from that, and then that extends into the fact that we've got a father and son writing this piece, as well as a father and the son acting in this piece. And I was just wanting to know, how did that impact the whole writing and then production of this film?
Well, this piece came about. This is a piece that took me the longest to write. I started it about 10 years ago after I visited a friend in a memory care unit. And he said, "I know the code, I can escape."
Yeah.
And that struck with me. And I wrote a first draft, second draft, whatever, and I sent it to my son, and I asked him to punch up the humor, to give it a little bit of humor. And he, rewrote it a little bit, and he added the humor, the things like Cynthia giving the finger, and the woman in the hallway, and some of the other little things. And then it sat in a drawer for a long time because I had no access to a nursing home. Didn't know how to really make a movie. I didn't have access to actors. Even back then, I actually wanted James Naughton for this part.
Wow.
So all these years go by. Jim and I worked together on Past Prologue. And we finished up Past Prologue, and I pulled the Not the Same Clarence script out of the drawer, and I looked at it, and I gave it another rewrite, and I sent it to my son, and I said, "Do you want to work on this together?" So he and I, over the course of a couple of months in the fall of 2022, rewrote the script kind of from the ground up. This time, though, with the inspiration of my father-in-law, who in the intervening years had come down with Alzheimer's, and at this point has advanced stage Alzheimer's. And he is somebody who I love, the same as my own father. I spent tons and tons of time with both my in-laws, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and they're wonderful, amazing, warm, beautiful people. And my father-in-law would say this thing as he was deteriorating, and when he still knew, what was going on, he would from time to time, he would literally point his finger, and he'd be like, "Not the same Norm."
Wow.
And that, and that was the inspiration for the line in the film, and also the title of the film. So my son and I rewrote this, and I sent it to Jim. I sent it to James Naughton because I had always wanted him to play that part. And that it took him 6 months to say yes the first time, It took him 6 hours to say yes the second time.
Mhm.
He called me up and he said, Brian, I'm in. He said,
Yeah.
what do you think if my son plays the Gideon character? What do you think if my son plays my son in the film?
Mhm.
Of course, the first thought I had was, can your son act? But come to find out, Greg Naughton is a beautiful actor and an amazing guy, and I love him so much. And he, came on board. I think he was a little nervous at first because it's a tough subject.
Yes.
James Naughton is now 78 years old, and
Sure.
he's sharp as he is completely sharp as a tack. But still, we can't help but think about these things with our parents.
Right.
And Greg even said to me, he said, I would be lying if I didn't say that if I didn't tell you this was uncomfortable for me.
Mhm.
But he agreed to do it. Sam and I directed it together. Greg and Jim acted in it together. And I think that overall, it really, it made it an experience that it wouldn't have been otherwise. It made it so much better and so much more powerful. And I think that you feel it on screen. Like,
Mhm.
I think you feel the connection and the dissonance by having the real father and son on screen.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, that leads me to my next question a bit too, where you bring out, and I've had experience with this as well, and people in homes as well, and my father, quite frankly. But the journey that you're on is such a tough journey. There's anger there, there's tension there, there's uncertainty, and it's a journey that both the father and the son are taking together. It's tough on both, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And then at the end, in that scene where they sort of come back and bond together, to me, it appeared like the father was finally realizing the value and the love of his son, and that he had to give himself up, almost in a way he might have given himself up to his wife if she was still there, to take care of him. It was almost like, and the father becomes the son of his own son. I was wondering if that's what you were seeing yourself, or what you were aiming for there.
So I love it when people bring themselves to the work and to the story. That's one of the things that I think is beautiful about film, and in fact, many stories, but especially film, where there's so much that is not said on screen, where you have to see it and you have to kind of interpret it. But for me, I don't think the father's capable of making any more decisions. I think that the father, everything that the professionals will tell you about Alzheimer's and dementia is that we have to go to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it no longer is about building memories or having experiences. It is about being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about loving the person exactly as they are right now.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is, for me, this is not at all the father's story or the father's arc. This is the son's arc, where the son understands, I have to go to my dad.
Yeah.
And, as they play baseball, all his dad wants is to be broken out of the facility. And so his son breaks him out of the facility with a little help from, Maria, the nurse, and that sort of thing. All the father wants to do is to be able to say what he wants to say and have his son respond lovingly. And his father doesn't know that. I don't think his father knows that in any conscious way, but that's what we all want. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to. We don't want to be told we're wrong. We don't want to be told, we don't want to be corrected. We want to be heard.
Yeah.
And in that end scene, when they're playing the game of catch, which, what's more, quintessential father and son than that, or father and daughter for that matter.
Sure.
And he says, it's my anniversary today. Janice is coming later. And Gideon says, I know, Dad, happy anniversary. To me, that's the son, like, acknowledging that his father is not the same, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you exactly. Well, beyond the film, beyond these two movies, again, which I think are so enjoyable and so poignant, what's next for you? Anything on the horizon?
Thank you for the kind words. I'm excited to have them play. I love, it's amazing when they play, in front of an audience. I have a film coming out. It's actually just started to roll out to festivals. I'll certainly be submitting it to Ridgewood. It's called Silver Sizzle, and it stars, wait for it, James Naughton.
Whoa.
and Boyd Gaines, and my friend Mike Boland. So
I see. Mike
has been a longtime collaborator, and this piece was written specifically for Jim and Boyd Gaines and Mike Boland. Boyd Gaines is a 4-time Tony Award-winning actor.
Wow.
He's also had a long career in television and film. You know, he was in Clint Eastwood's movie Heartbreak Ridge. He played Valerie Bertinelli's husband for a couple of seasons on One Day at a Time. He's been on Broadway for the last, 40 years. He is a beautiful human being and an amazing actor. And him and Jim are good friends, and they had never acted together before.
Wow.
So this was an opportunity to do something really fun and special. And it's it's a comedy. So it's completely different from the last two films. It does have similar themes. It does have themes of, looking at the human condition, looking at mortality, that sort of thing. But that one's rolling out right now. And then beyond that, I have, probably 6 scripts in development, 2 of which are close. My hope is to shoot actually 2 films this summer and keep rolling.
Good for you. I'm going to stop the video now, but please stay on for a minute. I just wanted to do one or more things with you.
Sure.
I was about to do that in a chat, but you ended at a perfect time. So let me come over here and